might be true, as Shakespeare postured, that some people are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. But I think there's another kind of greatness, a sadder kind. I think some people aren't great at all until they're gone. In life, they slip into shadows behind a false front of notoriety. They let themselves exist in rumor, not reality. It's their legacy, their impact, the ripples of change their death sends out into the world that makes them great. But great doesn't always mean good. In the summer of 22, 2 men were found dead in an apparent murder-suicide. It was an easy, clean-cut case of loss and revenge, but even a gentle tug on the threads of this story unraveled an ocean of questions that no one seemed to care to swim into. Neither man had family who felt it necessary to question the case, and the communities who were once so quick to flock to each moved on without a second thought. But something wasn't right, and all it takes is one person with a knot in their stomach to knock all the pieces down and try to rearrange them in the right way. I've known Nick my whole life. My family moved to Minnesota from Massachusetts in '98. It was partly to help out family friends who had also just moved out there, and partly to run away from lives that seemed to have been carved out for them already. Sometimes we all need a fresh start, to make something new of ourselves. Nick lived in the house right behind us, but both yards were fenced in, and we were on the outside of a giant cul-de-sac, so we had to circle the entire thing if we wanted to actually hang out. It was a good thing neither of us wanted to hang out. With anyone, really. But we both had backyard playsets with eagles' nests that rose above the fence line, and we were both prone to sitting up in them, escaping siblings, parents, the crushing weight of responsibility that you over-dramatize when you're 6. I would read, horror mostly, but sometimes just regular mysteries, and Nick would write, scribbling furiously in notepad after notepad, and for our whole first spring, summer, and fall, the air above the fence line may as well have been a glass wall. We sat in silence, half immersed in our own words, half desperately waiting for the other to crack first and say something. Then the snow came, 4 feet at a time, and the bodies that piled up in my books took all the space in my mind, pushing Nick out completely. The next spring passed in a similar silence, each of us slowly coming out of the winter hibernation and relishing the time we finally had back to ourselves in our separate forts. But once school had let out for the year and our days alone were longer, it was too much for me to maintain. Forgoing any introductions, I asked Nick what he was writing. I had to know, and he had clearly been waiting for someone to ask. He launched into a summary of his latest story, elbows propped up on the ledge of his playset and mine the same. He went on for what seemed like forever, honestly, because the story he was describing sounded like nothing I would have ever willingly read. I'll never forget when he finished just looking at him and asking, "So what happened?" He was as confused by the question as I was by his story, which didn't seem to me to be a story at all. It was just about a friend of his from school, what he did during the day, what he ate for lunch, the number of laps he completed on the track at recess. I kept asking what happened, but Nick cocked his head and said, "I just told you." A week went by, and he popped up again, asking if I wanted to hear the new story he just finished. I didn't, really, but I said yes anyway. It was exactly the same as the previous, but about his sister this time. I wanted to know where the action was, the tension, the missing clue that suddenly changes everything, but it never came. It never came in any of his stories. In turn, and with a shameless desire to show him what stories were supposed to be, I gave him a rundown of the latest Edgar Allan Poe story I was reading. I made sure to emphasize all of the exciting parts, the tension of each pendulum swing as it arced closer and closer to the narrator's torso. When I was done, Nick asked me his name. "Whose name?" "The narrator's," he urged. I said he doesn't have one. And Nick wondered why I would want to read a story about someone who was so disconnected from the reader that he wouldn't even share his name. We went back and forth a few more weeks, me sharing more Poe, see we know Prospero's name, and him sharing more about the people around him. Sometimes he was so close to getting exciting, but in the end they never really did anything that seemed that special. Eventually, my dad put a gate into the fence and we would sit together in one eagle's nest or the other, sharing our stories. He would make notes in the margins of my books, adding description and detail where he felt it was lacking, to my absolute horror, taking every offense for Doyle, Poe, and Shelley. And I would add notes into the pages of his writing, adding gunshots and magical artifacts where I thought they could be useful. Nick has always been about people, and I've always been about action. And I think that's why we got along so well as we got older. It's also why, when he came to me this summer with a story about murder, I knew something was very wrong. I was sitting in the backyard at my family's house, visiting home from St. Paul for a break between assignments, when his arms popped up over the fence. In one hand, he had a bottle of wine, in the other, a tall, thin blue book. After catching up for a while, he asked if I would read his latest story, just like we used to. I turned the galley proof over in my hands. It looked short enough, so I started reading and he just watched, studying my face as I got to different moments, peering over my shoulder to see where I was. Pretty quickly, I could tell that this wasn't just a story he wanted to share like we used to. There was something so different about this than the pieces he had written up until he left for college. In those, he was always just an observer, a silent voice looking in on other lives, filling in the blanks where he wasn't involved. This one was so personal, so full of longing, love, and loss, and Nick himself was at the center of it all. It was almost 2 a.m. when I finally finished. Years ago, I would have applauded the surprising prevalence of action, especially in violence, but there was nothing to celebrate, no joy to take away. I had heard about the deaths, everyone had. Even though New York was halfway across the country, another world entirely, it had spread. But the names meant nothing to me, and I hadn't given them much of a second thought. He asked me what I thought when I set the papers down, and I told him it was beautiful. Sad, but beautiful. That's when he asked me to start recording.
It's wrong.
What do you mean it's wrong?
The ending, the murder-suicide, it's not right. It's not what happened.
Oh, then why did you write it?
It's what I thought happened. I thought it's what happened. It's what everyone said happened. The police were in and closed it. It took me 2 years to write it and another 6 months before I sent it into the publishers.
What changed?
It wasn't sitting right with me. I know that on paper it makes sense, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right, that everyone was missing something major. So I went back and I found something.
What did you find?
I could just be making a big deal out of nothing,
Ooh,
but it just feels too big to ignore, and I needed to tell someone, and I thought
Nick.
You were the first person I could think of. I didn't want to go to the cops. They closed it already, and I didn't want to lose it.
Nick, stop for a second. What did you find? He got up and started pacing around the table, thinking about it. Then he came back down and sat next to me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a bag, laying it down on the table with shaky hands. Inside the bag was a sterling silver lighter splattered with blood and caked in dirt. I moved it closer to the lamp in order to get a better look. The blood was dark and matte, and gritty sand hid the streaks of silver trying to shine through. But in the bottom corner, you could just make out an etched, cursive B. Where did you find this?
In the bushes a few paces away from where they found the body.
When did you say?
About a month ago. I've been holding on to it since. I didn't know what to do with it. Like I said, I knew something was wrong, and I've been turning it over and over in my brain, so part of me just felt compelled to go back and put those thoughts to rest.
Is anyone living there?
No. No one can afford it.
And you haven't told anyone else about this?
No.
Why are you here? Why me?
You're a reporter. You're good at this. You find answers when no one else even thinks they exist.
I mean, I've exposed a few political scandals. I hardly think that...
You dig when no one else will, and I've
never solved a murder before.
I don't have anyone else.
Nick, we have to go to the police.
I know. No, I know, but I wanted to come to you first.
So that I could tell you to go to the police?
So that you could come with me. Best hope we have is they could let us see the original files, and I just can't do that alone. Intellectually, investigatively, but also emotionally.
You want me to come to New York with you?
I talked to your dad the other day before you got back. He said you're off for a couple of weeks.
You brought my dad into this?
No, not this. No, I just asked if you'd be around.
Did he ask if you wanted to know so you could propose?
He did, yes.
Great.
Joe has always been our biggest cheerleader.
Cheerleader who's never seen a sport.
But he's all in.
If we disappeared in New York together, he's going to lose his mind.
Do you...
No, I had a thing ended last year, but it just wasn't right. You? Were you in...
No, I mean, you read it.
I'm sure, but I didn't know if...
No.
Got it.
Sorry, just...
No, I know. Do you know whose it is?
No. I mean, I have some ideas.
Could be anyone's, really.
Or it could have been dropped by someone just trying to get a better look at the place a year later.
Or that.
Bottom line is that it wasn't George's. I know that for sure. And it's enough to push me over the edge where I already knew something wasn't right.
When do you want to leave?
Is tomorrow too soon? I've already booked tickets.
That sure I'd be saying yes.
Are you?
Why not, I guess. Let's go investigate a murder. We left early the next day, bound for New York. It had been a late night and an early morning, and there was an uneasiness that clouded my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that what we were heading to was more than either of us could or should handle. Along the way, I put in a call to the police department that had handled the case. Because of its high-profile nature, officers from the city were called down to investigate, but from the sound of it, they made short work of their search.
Everyone who had been in the hotel that day was called in. All four of us, plus a few others. They were hardly interrogating us, just running through a list of basic questions to try and wrap up all of the deaths. I think I asked them more questions than they asked me. I can't bring myself to even call it an investigation, just crossing T's and dotting I's for the sake of the department, I guess. With multiple bodies, I think they had to. Some internal rule or something.
I prepared myself for a complicated phone call. Every bit of evidence I had dug through for a Tribune story I had to fight for. I had spent hours in police station lobbies waiting for someone to acknowledge me, let alone agree to hand anything over. I don't know if New York was the difference, or the fact that no one seemed to care about this closed case, but it took less than a minute for the desk officer to transfer me to the lead detective, Blaine Amory. It was a story for the Tribune, I said, a feature on folks from the Midwest who've moved out east and found nothing but heartbreak and death. I kept my voice calm and disarming, curious, but not too curious. Knowing more about the Midwesterners involved in such a high-profile case could be helpful in painting the right picture for anyone finding themselves drawn to the glamour of the city. I strained my ear to hear any distrust or break in his breathing as he paused, but it didn't take too long for him to agree to let me see select copies of the files and interview recordings. He offered, if I was also interested in seeing the crime scene, that we should meet there to hand over the files, in case I had any questions. I asked Nick if he was all right to go back, if the memory of it all would be too much for him. He said he'd be fine, but there was an emptiness in his voice and a blankness in his eyes as we got in the car to drive down. The trip was silent and dusty. I spent the ride turning over every moment he had written, playing through the series of events in my head as they came back to me. If there really was more to the case, I knew Nick would be too close to see it. The pictures he had painted in his story were too personal, without objectivity enough to track the details. He knew it would be a weakness, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's why he came to me. He knew I always kept an arm's length from the people around me, everyone except him, and wouldn't let myself get swept up in personal attachments. I started to wonder if letting him give me his own version of events first wouldn't have a negative impact on my perception of everyone involved, but I'd wait until I had the tapes and could hear firsthand from the others to determine that. As we pulled up to the house, I couldn't keep my jaw from dropping. With every story, every description, every picture in the news that I had seen, I thought I would know what to expect. But nothing can prepare you for a mansion of that size. There was a beat-up black car already in the circular drive. The detective had made it there before us. Nick rolled to a stop and let out a long breath. The pain of the entire estate was palpable as I got out of the car, craning my neck to scan each window, many of them smashed in as it had stood empty for so long. In its abandonment, it was brutal. but the deep orange sunset reflecting off the windows hinted at the warmth and beauty it may have once held. We walked around the side of the house to see the detective standing at the edge of the patio, duster flapping in the breeze off the water. Detective Emery?
Oh, I see you brought company.
This is
I know. This isn't for a city scare article, is it?
He shook my hand firmly as we met him at the back of the house, and sighed as Nick gave one small shake of his head. Behind him, a faint green light blinked on a dock across the bay. Detective Emery, we're here to solve the murder of Jay Gatsby. All That Glitters is written, produced, and edited by me, Steph Crugnola, inspired by The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This episode features Pablo Muñoz-Evers as Nick Carraway and Mike Crugnola as Detective Amory. Music by Josh Kavanaugh.